All right. So obviously, my name is Toby, and I'm a senior at Dubisky High School in Grand Prairie. I'm pretty sure that's probably the furthest from Fort Worth, but that actually plays a really important role in my story. You see, I actually live in Arlington, and obviously, I call Doxology my church home here in Fort Worth. I really started seeing the impact that this had on my life when I was in fourth grade. Living in the middle of these two cities, I was always too far away to hang out with my friends. And even when I was invited to soccer games or birthday parties, I didn't even bother asking my parents because I didn't want them to go out of their way for me. I really just started feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. And the problem only got worse in high school. See, last year I got this internship that requires me to work in Dallas. And from where I work to the church parking lot is 44 miles, or about an hour and 45 minutes in rush hour traffic, which is a little far. See, with 4 different cities, there were 4 different groups of people, and everywhere I went, I felt pressured to be who they wanted me to be. That meant 4 different versions of me, and I started to reflect those around me because I thought it'd be easier for me to fit in like that. I thought I had to look a certain way or act a certain way based on where I was and who I was with. And going into senior year, I kind of found a lot more freedom. I had my own car, I had my own job, I made my own money, and I was responsible for my own time. I started realizing that I could really go anywhere and do anything. I started thinking, maybe I could use this to fix some of the problems that I thought I had in my life. That only led me to doing whatever I could to fit in with these people that I still weren't even sure were my friends. I didn't know if they'd have my back whenever problems came up, and I look back now and just see that they weren't great influences on me at all. I just found myself in a place where I was really frustrated and I really didn't care about anything going on around me. Y'all ever had that? Some of those friends where even before you hang out, you just always get mad or sad or just kind of upset, and they haven't even done anything yet? Or like the friends that always have drama, something crazy going on, and not in like a fun way. That's where I found myself at. See, I didn't know if I could call on these people whenever I had problems. I wasn't even comfortable telling them about other parts of my life. They really only knew what I wanted them to think about me. And soon I found myself spending a lot of money that I really didn't have. I stopped caring about my body and everything that I put into it, and I really started to push away from my friends and family. I knew that they only wanted what was best for me. They only wanted to help. But I kept avoiding those conversations with excuses, just kind of like, oh, it's been a long day, or I'm just tired. I really started to feel like I was spinning a lot of plates. I was trying to balance my school and work and home life, and I really started digging myself into a hole that I really didn't even realize I was in until I'd already reached the bottom. See, I thought that even if I wanted to stop, I don't know how to anymore. I really didn't even know who I was without everyone around me just kind of pulling me in every different direction. I'd push away everyone that wanted to help, and the people that I kept around me were still tearing me down. I felt like I was fighting for myself with no one really to rely on. I felt alone. See, have you ever found yourself overwhelmed by your day-to-day life and felt like there was no one there to help you out? Do you ever change who you are based on who you're with or what's going on around you? Or do you find yourself running with people that are leading you down the wrong path? If you can relate to any of my story or said yes to any of those questions, my prayer for you tonight is that God will reveal himself to you the same way that he's been moving in my life this past year. See, even when I felt stuck, God was doing great things in my life, and I really wanted to share that. So I'm going to start tonight in Acts 2, where the author Luke shows us just how powerful this biblical concept of community is. For context, this is shortly after Jesus ascends back up into heaven, and God introduced us to this Holy Spirit through this amazing miracle where what looks like fire comes down on the disciples, and they start speaking about Jesus in a whole bunch of different languages that none of them have ever known before. It's kind of cool. But for a lot of people, this is the first time they hear about God. This is in the very same place that these people had just crucified Jesus, and he came back from death. And 3,000 of them that day gave their life to Christ. Kind of cool. But now there's a lot of new Christians, and they're not really sure what to do because they can't follow Jesus around and just listen to everything that he has to say. But God gave them the Holy Spirit to kind of guide them through all of this. And this is where he leads them to. So in Acts 2, starting at verse 42, all the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, and to sharing meals and to prayer. A deep sense of awe came over them all. The apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders, and all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day, the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. Now, it may sound like a lot to unpack here, but this is how God really wants us to live in community. See, the church wasn't just a building they would go to maybe once or twice a week to learn about him. Yeah, they studied Jesus' teachings, but they also they prayed and they passed the plate and took up an offering. But the important thing is that they did it all together. The church was the group of people that they lived their lives with. Sometimes they just get together, hang out, and eat. When things were bad, they'd mourn together and they'd help each other out. And when things were going great, they'd even celebrate together. See, through this past year, I've realized that God hasn't changed anything about the way that he's designed for us to live in this community. I had to change who I was and the way that I interacted with my small group. I started acknowledging that they, just like me, had lives outside of Wednesday nights and Sunday mornings. Spending time together talking to each other about the message is great, but if you're only friends with each other for an hour each week, you're missing out on so much more. See, just these past few months, the senior guys have started going out to get wings after the bridge on Wednesday nights. It gives us a little bit more time to share some of the stories from our week and just kind of unpack what's been going on in our lives. And living in this true community, we really get to know each other so much better, and we actually start to care what everyone else has to say. And the food really isn't too bad either. And see, I know for me at least, growing up in the church, I kind of always felt like, oh, I know the answers, and I can go through the motions. Small group just kind of seemed like a quiz at the end of the night before I could go home. But I kind of let that perspective get in my way. The conversations we're having here are way, way more important than that. And it's far too important to just fake our way through it. So God's called us into the community to dive into deeper discussions. In my group, we saw that a lot of us are facing the same problems, but we also had a lot of really great things we could share with each other. As we began sharing what was really going on in our lives, I started realizing that I'm not the only person facing some of my problems, and it made me feel so much less alone. When we're part of God's family, we never have to face our problems by ourselves. Suddenly, I felt like I had people in my corner fighting for me and fighting with me. So living out this biblical example of community shows us that we must be friends with our small groups outside of the church building. Shows us that we need to be devoted to Jesus and to each other. And there's so many different ways that we can get connected today. Just send a text and ask someone how they're doing or what you can be praying for them. Invite your small group over for lunch or game night or something and connect with each other on the Bible app and just go through a plan. Just be intentional with each other and help each other find the encouragement we need to try and live great lives with God. See, now that I knew that I was surrounded by a strong community of believers, I felt like I was ready to face my problems. By changing the people that I was closest with, God's voice became clearer in my life. My friends kept me focused on him and the direction he had for my life. And even in the face of temptations, I knew they would keep me accountable and remind me to look to God as the center of love and acceptance in my life. See, when God isn't the center of our community, our friends can get us in so much trouble. Like at work this summer, it had been a slow day leading up, and one of the guys was leaving for Michigan the next week, so we took him out to lunch to celebrate. It hadn't been long, and we were talking and just throwing around some pretty bad ideas, and I knew everything was wrong there, but I didn't want to be the odd one out. And eventually, by the end of the day, we'd ended up back at the shop, and we were racing around on furniture dollies, and it was all fun and games, but one of the guys fell and twisted his ankle pretty bad. We had to be held accountable for our actions, and there were some pretty serious consequences. Those conversations were not fun. See, I knew I had messed up, but I also didn't care, like, at all. It kind of scared me how little I was worried about how this was going to impact my future. In that moment, I decided that I would rather have been wrong with the crowd than stay true to what I knew was right. See, we all know peer pressure exists. They teach it at school and at church and even at home by our parents. But in those moments, you have to be strong enough to make your own decisions, even if it isn't the most popular. See, we have to actively decide that the friends that we have dragging us down aren't going to be the loudest in our lives anymore. We need friends that are going to live out Hebrews 10:24. It says, "Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works." So simply listening to each other's problems obviously isn't going to fix everything. We have to motivate and encourage one another to turn to God in both the highs and the lows. We have to help carry each other's burdens. And sometimes that does mean we have to sit and listen. Sometimes it means we offer advice or help out physically. And even other times it means we have to challenge each other and just ask hard questions. And see, that's a two-way door though. Because if you ask the questions, it shows that you care. But change only comes when you're brave enough to answer them. It's kind of like you're running headfirst into a brick wall. If none of your friends speak up and say something, you're going to get hurt. And see, that's what real friends do. If they see you making bad decisions, they'll speak up about it. That's what it means to motivate each other to good things. And see, in my life, this meant stepping out in small group to try and get the most out of the time that we had on Wednesday nights. I think it's something that we can all struggle with. It's easy to get distracted, or you want to make that joke, or just a whole bunch of different little things, but you know you should be a little bit more serious. And something that I see now is that even though not every conversation we had in small group was something profound and life-changing, I saw a real change in my life when I made an effort to be transparent and real with my small group. See, sharing the smaller parts of my life made it so much easier to open up about maybe some of the bigger things that I was going through. I started meeting with mentors and some of my close friends when things popped up that I knew I couldn't handle on my own. And they pushed me to step out of my comfort zone and just really kick some of the bad habits, and they helped me make God's voice the loudest in my life again. Putting him first started to drown out all the other noise that was dragging me down, and I could see clear when I was making decisions about the rest of my life. See, now I know a lot of you might be thinking, some of the stuff I've been sharing tonight is good, but it's all about what community looks like at church. But what about the places like school where we're not always surrounded by Christ followers? Well, you see, God doesn't call us to live in a bubble. He does want us to live in this community, but he also wants us to go out and share his love with those who don't know him. He gives us a lot of examples from Jesus and the woman at the well, or the Good Samaritan, and even Jonah's story in the Old Testament. But I think it's so important that as we go out, we remember what he says in Romans 12:2, where Paul says, "Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way that you think." See, changing to fit the world around us always leads us further away from God. But he calls us to stand firm in our faith, even when the people around us aren't the best. When you let God lead you, you start to live differently. When you have a good core of friends around you, suddenly outside influences just don't have as much impact. It makes it so much easier to share God's grace and love and mercy and kindness when you're experiencing it in abundance yourself. So for me, this meant spending a lot less time with some of the friends that I knew were causing me harm. See, I still try to show them God's love, but I know that when that temptation rises, I have an even stronger community to fall back on. For others, it meant I was more active in my faith. Maybe they knew I was a Christian, but that was only because I had told them. I started being more intentional with my actions, and I admitted when I knew I'd messed up. I opened up to more faith-based conversations, and I even invited some of them to church. Now, see, community is something that we're all going to experience, whether it's good or bad. And a lot of it is just because of the people we hang out with. Just being with a certain group of people over time naturally pulls you together. However, through prayer and a little bit of effort, you can change your community for the better. So be mindful about the people that you keep your company with. Be intentional about your time with good friends, and be proactive to love and show God's love to those around you, even if they're not Christians. So tonight I'm calling you to look at the people you keep around you. Who do you spend the most time with? Are they building you up or tearing you down? Do you speak positively to each other, encourage each other? Or is there always drama and you find yourself complaining or just putting each other down? See, before I would always leave sad or angry or just bored after hanging out with the people that I thought were my friends. Our conversations were pretty much meaningless. We'd talk about nothing and I'd still leave feeling lonely or jealous. Like all they had to say was just negative. See, true friends really care about you. They don't talk down to you. They encourage you to turn towards God. Conversations that leave you feeling better. And that's something that I didn't get at first. So what community and what friends have the loudest voice in your life? Is that community helping you keep God in command? See, when I put other people's opinions in control of my life, it left me running around in circles, trying to be a whole bunch of different things that just weren't me. Putting God back in command by leaning on a God-centered community really drowned everything else out. Listening to his voice, everything else was just noise. I can focus on him to give me direction and value. Pray with me. Dear Lord God, I pray tonight that just as we go out into small groups, that we can really see how these people can help us live so much better lives through you, God. That maybe the people that we keep around us aren't the best, and you don't want us to give up on them, but maybe they shouldn't have as much influence. I pray that as we go out, especially over the summer too, that we watch who we're really pouring into and who's really pouring into us. I just pray that you can be at the center of all of our community. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Can we get up for Toby Damon? Such an encouraging word from Toby. I love the fact that Toby was real. I love the fact that he was honest about what he was really dealing with in his life. And as an adult, as someone that's up here that works for the church, can I admit that sometimes life stinks? Life is hard. Anybody else ever feel like life is hard? Life is difficult. Some of the things that life throws at us. Here's the question I want to ask. Why do we keep trying to do it alone? Why do we keep trying to pretend like we're strong enough, that we're wise enough, that we've got the courage to do it, when that's not how God made us? God made us to need him, to depend on him, to trust in him. And he designed us to be together in community, to do life together in community. And y'all, we get to do this every Wednesday night. But you don't have to wait till Wednesday to talk about real things. You have an opportunity this summer to really dig deep and to invest in your friendships, to really find those people that are going to push you in the right direction. Right? I tell students all the time, if I look at your friends, I can tell you what your future is going to be. Your friends matter. Your relationship with Jesus matters. Because we're not meant to do life alone. So here's the challenge for tonight. We just have a few minutes left for small group. Can we just cut out all the nonsense? This is the last one for the semester, for the school year. And can we just get right to what's really going on inside here? What's really going on inside of here? And what's really going on in our lives? Can we do that? Okay, that was a little weak. Can we do that? Okay. So before we dismiss to small groups, there is one thing I want to do real fast. Students, you may not know this. You may not even realize this, but your small group leaders are people. You know, like, shh. You know, sometimes you go to school and you feel like your teacher is just a teacher, like, and then you see them outside of the classroom, they're like, whoa, they're a person. Shh. Here's my point. We have incredible adult leaders who give up their time away from their families. They spend energy and they text you and they call you and they visit you. And they don't have to do that. But they do it because they love you. Because they want to be there as part of your community. So if you're a small group leader in the room, would you just stand up for us? Students, I know this is a foreign word for many of you. But tonight, at the end of our group time, would you tell your leader thank you? Would you? No, not right now. You didn't look at it in there. Shh. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to have an incredible group time, and I want you to actually tell your leader thank you and why you're thankful for them. So, here's the time where we're going to head to our small groups.